Building a decent retro PC can be a challenge. Not only can it be difficult to collect the right components and peripherals without spending a fortune, but you also have to remember or even learn from scratch how these things work, and you have to deal with all the issues that come with aging hardware. Welcome back to my series about building a 1996 retro PC. Today we're going to fix some issues with this rig, put it into a case, and hopefully turn it into a period-correct gaming beast. As you might remember from the previous video, my old Soyo SY5TF motherboard had a dead CMOS battery. Unfortunately, instead of a coin cell battery we're used to seeing in modern PCs, this board uses a Dallas RTC module. Many old motherboards use these modules, which combine a real-time clock, BIOS settings memory and a battery in a single sealed plastic brick. Finding a working replacement for such a module is getting pretty expensive, so I decided to fix it instead by attaching an external CR2032 battery. It was my first time ever doing this, so if you want to learn how to do it yourself, I'll better leave a link or two to some other resources down in the description. Once I put the modified RTC module back onto the motherboard, the computer posted just fine and the battery error was gone. On the first boot, however, there was still a CMOS checksum error, but that was expected since no BIOS settings had been saved yet. I was finally able to save my BIOS settings, and once I did, all the errors were gone. Speaking of BIOS configuration, on old motherboards like this, to save a few seconds during boot, I changed the hard drive detection from auto to fixed geometry for the channel the hard drive is actually connected to, and I disable hard drive detection for the other channels. This only affects hard drive detection and has no impact on CD-ROM drives, they still work just fine. Also, once I install the operating system, I change the boot sequence so the computer boots directly from the hard drive instead of looking for a floppy disk or a CD every single time it turns on. Now, for this particular motherboard, the setting I missed the most while the RTC module was dead was the DRAM timing. Lower timing values reduce memory latency and improve overall system performance, provided the installed RAM modules can handle them. I use the predefined 60 nanosecond setting. The performance difference is measurable, and my memory sticks are rock stable with this setting. Up until this point, this build has been a pretty standard, solid 1996 machine. It runs DOS games and early Windows titles just fine. However, I've been saving a secret weapon for later. You might already have a guess what it is. The 3DFX Voodoo. This is the card up my sleeve, the ultimate game changer, the absolute legend that's about to take our machine from a basic home PC to a cutting-edge gaming rig of its era. But I still needed a proper chassis. Since I spent most of my budget for this project on the Voodoo card itself, the case had to be rather cheap. Luckily, I managed to find a decent, inexpensive 80 form factor case that is definitely not perfect. It has a few dents and scratches here and there, but it came with an AT power supply that was really clean and healthy looking inside, and it had a brand new fan already installed. While I'm busy getting everything mounted inside the case, I'm curious what your thoughts are on power supplies in retro systems. On one hand, original vintage units are obviously period correct, but most importantly, they were designed for the power requirements of the systems from their era, especially the strong 5 volts rail. On the other hand, these grey bricks are now decades old. Even if such an old power supply still works, there's always a risk that it fails unexpectedly, or worse, takes the rest of your valuable hardware with it. So I'm really curious, what's your approach? Do you trust old power supplies, or do you prefer to adapt more modern units when building retro PCs? Let me know down in the comments. And here is the final result. I couldn't find any suitable replacements for the missing 5.25-inch front panel cover, so I decided to install a hard drive caddy instead. Let's not forget the VGA pass-through cable, which lets you get a video signal from both your primary graphics card and the accelerator. Once you install a 3DFX Voodoo, you no longer connect your monitor directly to the main graphics card. Instead, you plug it into the Voodoo card, and most of the time it simply passes through the signal from the primary graphics card. But when you launch a full-screen game that uses the accelerator, the Voodoo takes over and renders the image itself. Alright, it's time to fire it up. Let's play some games and see how the 3DFX Voodoo improves gaming capabilities of this machine. For the first comparison, let's take a look at Need for Speed 2 Special Edition. When I ran it in the standard software rendering mode, I found the medium graphics settings to offer the best balance between image quality and performance. When I cranked the settings up to high, the gameplay became choppy. It helps somewhat to switch to the cockpit view, since the car's dashboard takes up about half of the screen, leaving less of the actual scene to be rendered. However, if the game installer detects a Voodoo accelerator in the system, it installs the 3DFX version of the executable file, offering the standard binary as an option. In 3DFX mode, the game not only looks better than it does at the highest possible settings in software mode, but it also runs at a much higher frame rate. I could enable all the details, set the draw distance to medium or high, and still enjoy smooth gameplay. The frame rate would dip slightly when there was a lot happening on the screen, but for the most part, the game ran very smoothly, delivering pure joy. The interesting quirk is that the cockpit view is no longer available in 3DFX mode, just as if the game developers treated it simply as a performance trick for systems without Voodoo. Next up is Carmageddon. By default, this game runs in software mode at a resolution of 320 by 200. The game directory also contains a high-res executable, which launches the game at 640 by 480, but on this rig it was rather a slideshow. Even at the standard 320 by 200, the frame rate left a bit to be desired. In Carmageddon, you can resize the gameplay window using the plus and minus keys. Making it smaller helps with performance, but it can make objects on the screen harder to recognize given the already low resolution. However, there is a 3DFX glide patch for Carmageddon. Once I applied it, I was able to play the game at high resolution comfortably most of the time. The game is still pretty CPU hungry and the frame rate was unstable when things got chaotic on screen, but I could tolerate that since it's one of my favorite games from its era. In glide mode, I could see much more details, which was a big improvement for me in this game. Quake. I couldn't imagine my 1996 retro PC without this legendary 1996 shooter. Running it in the standard CPU rendered mode, I didn't see much point in pushing the resolution past 320 by 240. Because it's a fast-paced game, you need more frames per second for comfortable play. But even at that low resolution, Quake still looks stunning to me. The atmosphere is just incredible. But then, there is GL Quake, the official OpenGL port that brings hardware acceleration to the game. On my Pentium 133 with the Voodoo card, it runs silky smooth at 640 by 480. However, here is my hot take. I personally find the gritty software rendered surfaces a bit more charming than the smooth out textures in the OpenGL version. I also tried running Unreal on this machine, even though it officially requires at least a Pentium 166. That didn't stop me from installing and launching the game anyway, but in software mode it was painfully slow, even at the lowest settings. For some reason the game wouldn't let me turn off dynamic lighting, though honestly, I'm not sure I'd even want to play Unreal without it. Switching over to 3DFX Glide made it somewhat playable at its lowest available resolution of 512 by 384. Whenever the action picked up in-game, the performance drops could be pretty severe, but this game is just so awesome. If I were a kid back in the day playing it like this, I don't think I'd even care. LEGO Racers is another game that my rig shouldn't be able to handle in theory. Officially, this game requires at least a Pentium MMX 166, and when you try to install it on a slower CPU, the installer pops up a warning about it, but still lets you proceed. And as it turns out, my Pentium 133, paired with that Voodoo card, runs the game surprisingly well. Not only do the menu animations and cutscenes play smoothly, but the actual game is completely playable. I was able to race through several tracks and win without any issues. I only noticed one area of this game where the Pentium 133 falls behind: the intro videos. These are pre-rendered video files, and on this machine, the video lags behind the audio, as you can see in this side-by-side comparison. However, there's an easy workaround. You can automatically skip the videos by adding the -no video parameter to the game's shortcut in Windows. Last but certainly not least, it feels as if Rayman 2: The Great Escape is the game I built this PC for, even though that was never the plan. By pure coincidence, this machine just hits the game's minimum requirements and nothing more. It has a Pentium 133 CPU, 32 MB of RAM, a 3D accelerator with 4 MB of video RAM, and it's running Windows 95. Despite being right on the edge, Rayman 2 runs remarkably well. The gameplay is smooth and responsive, and I never felt like the system was struggling to keep up. By the way, I love these colorful environments, vibrant cartoon-style graphics, and imaginative world design. Combined with the enchanting soundtrack, they create a magical fairy tale atmosphere that I'm still in love with today, even as an adult. So that's the finished build. A Pentium 133, 32 MB of RAM, and a 3DFX Voodoo. The kind of setup many could only dream about in 1996. For me, it's a perfect reminder of just how quickly PC gaming evolved during the late 90s. And honestly, after spending some time playing period-correct games on 3DFX Voodoo, I completely understand the hype it caused back in the day. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel for more retro projects, tests and memories. And let me know in the comments, what was the very first PC you ever used and what are your favorite memories with it? Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.